Now that we can read the input that the user typed, we are ready to ask the GitHub API for a single profile data using this typed input. We can use the native fetch call available in browsers to do an AJAX call. But this playground also has the Axios library, and Axios is a simple one to use here. So in the handle submit function, all we need to do is axios.get and then specify the API endpoint where the data is. And this is the API input that we need. So in here, if we're to fetch Dan's profile information again, we just use this syntax. But because we want this to be a dynamic part, we'll go ahead and make this whole thing into a template string. Note backticks in here. And inside this, we can inject the value of the username that the user inputted in the box, which is this.state.username. We put that in here. Okay, that's how you do an Axios call. Now, axios.get returns back a promise. So to consume this promise, we can await on it, and this will give us back a response object. To make this await call work, we need to label this handle submit as async. Now, we can console log the response object, and let's go ahead and test that. So in here, type any valid GitHub username, click add card, and the handle submit will go and fetch that particular username's profile data, and it will print back the response. Now this response has a data attribute that has the actual profile information from GitHub. So what we need here is response.data. This is just the way Axios work. It returns a response object and then a data attribute on that response object that has the JSON data parsed and ready for us. Now, all we need to do next is append this data object that we get from the API to the profiles array that we have on the app state. And when we do that, React will re-render the app component and show the new GitHub profile. However, this form component can't access the profiles state elements directly here because React components have a one-way flow of data and a component can't change the state of its parent. But remember that the app component can pass properties to its form child component, and those properties can be simple primitive values or function references. So if the app component passes a function reference to the form component, we can change the state of the app component in that function, and the form component will be able to invoke that function because it will be part of its props object. Let's define a new function here on the app component. I'm going to name it add new profile, make it an arrow function, and this function will simply receive the new profile data as an argument. So this will be the profile data, and it will do something with it. For now, let's just console log this profile data to make sure things are working in the app component. Then we pass to the form component a new prop. Let's name this prop here on submit and pass it this.add new profile. So the add new profile is a function that we defined on the instance of this component. And in here, we are making it available as a new prop on the form component. So within this handle submit function, instead of console.log here, we can access the new prop that became part of the form component. And to do that, we do this.props.onSubmit. Right. This is a new prop, and it holds a function reference, and that function reference is an alias to the add new profile function in the app component. And as an argument, we pass it the data attribute that's coming from the Axios response. If we test now and type in a valid GitHub username, you will see the app component console log line, and you'll see the GitHub profile data ready for us here. So here, instead of console log, we need to put this new profile data on the state of the app component. We need to append this object to the array of objects that we have stored as profiles here on the state. And to do that, we have a few options. We do need to invoke setState. Remember, this is the function that we need to change the state of a React class component. And in here, we can pass either an object or a function. The updater function syntax is the same here. So I'm going to use a function. This function will give you access to the previous state. And what you return here from this function becomes the new state. So I'm going to return profiles is, and in here, I will spread the existing profiles. That is something that we can read using previous state.profiles, and then append the new profile data. This is equivalent to doing a concat operation on the profiles array. This is the spread operator syntax. And with that, I think we're ready to test. So starting with the test data, we can now add a fourth card. There you go. So now we can remove all the test data and start the profiles array as an empty one like this, and remove the test data from the scope. We don't need that anymore. I've included the GitHub username I've been testing with here. So now you can test from an empty card and add one card at a time. Notice how the username stayed here after we added the card. So one small improvement that we can do on this is to reset the username field after we're done adding it to the profiles array. So we can simply just have another set state call in here and pass in a username value of empty string, and that would reset the username state value that React is using to track the username that gets typed into the box. So let's test one more time, and now after adding the card, the username here should reset. There's another important improvement that we need. When you start adding data to this form, React will give you a warning about the key prob. This key prob is something React needs whenever you render a dynamic list of children like we're doing here in the card list component. React will give you a warning that if you don't specify some kind of identity for this dynamic element, then React will just assume that the position of the element is its identity, and that might cause problems if you start reordering those elements. So to avoid issues like this, you just pass a key property here to React, and this key property has to be unique in this particular DOM node. So the GitHub data comes with an ID that's unique, so we can just use that. We can do profile.id, and if you do that, that warning should go away. And I think we have the GitHub Cards app. You can use it to add as many cards as you need. It's all driven from a single array, and it fetches information directly from GitHub. Now, there are a lot of improvements that we can do to this code, but there is one very important thing that we did not do. We did not handle errors. What should the UI do if the user types in an invalid GitHub handle? What should the UI do if the request of data fails over the network? What should the UI do if the request is taking too long? In fact, if you were in an interview doing an exercise like this, you should voice these concerns right away. These concerns are not really beginner level, so I'm going to keep them as an exercise for you. I cover examples of them in my book, React.js Beyond the Basics at JS Complete. There are other simple improvements you can make to this code. For example, here in handle submit, we have some logic to fetch data from an API. Then we have some application logic about what to do with that data that's coming from the API. This is a bad mix. A component should not have this much responsibility. Your whole app should not really depend directly on a library like Axios, for example. You should have a small agent type module that has one responsibility: to communicate with external APIs and make your code only depend on that agent module. Another thing you could do is extract this logic about managing the state of the username input into its own component as well. And this would simplify the form components code. I think this is a good stopping point for this example. Play around with the final code, which I saved here under jsdrops.com/RGS 2.7. One quick exercise you can do: convert all the class components into function components. So instead of state here, you use a hook. And instead of this.setState, you use the updater function from the hook.